Viewer discretion is strongly advised before we begin. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the Sean Diddy Combs Arpotab trial, reported by Inner City Press. In a packed federal courtroom, the voice of Tupac Shakur echoed through the speakers, raw, emotional, and unfiltered. It was a never-before-heard recording from an unreleased interview, buried for decades and allegedly suppressed by Sean Diddy Combs himself. But now, in the midst of an explosive trial that's threatening to dismantle Diddy's empire, this tape has resurfaced, and it might be the final nail in the coffin. Tupac, once dismissed as paranoid, now sounds like a prophet. His words, recorded shortly before his death, paint a chilling picture of betrayal, manipulation, and power games within the music industry. And at the center of it all, Diddy. This isn't just about East Coast versus West Coast anymore. This is about a man who may have known he was being hunted and left a message behind, just in case. The courtroom wasn't even on anyone's radar yet, but Tupac had already seen it coming. Long before the trial, long before Cassie Kazia and ever testified, or Monique looked the industry in the face and said, "No more." Tupac was already shouting from the inside, and no one wanted to listen. Not because they didn't believe him, but because the truth he was trying to tell was too dangerous. It would have cracked the glass way too early. It started with an interview, one that has become something of a legend. Angie Martinez, Tupac, 1996. 2 hours long, but the public only ever heard 10 minutes. Angie claimed she held back the rest to protect the peace, to prevent further escalation of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. But now we know that was a lie. And not just any lie, a lie backed by power. According to Gene Deal, one of Diddy's closest associates, it wasn't Angie's decision to hold the interview back. It was Diddy's. Let that sink in. Back then, Diddy wasn't just a rising mogul. He was a kingmaker, a manipulator, and according to multiple insiders, he was secretly running. Hot 97. From behind the scenes, he had real pull, enough to kill stories before they saw daylight. Enough to erase voices, including Tupac's. In that unreleased interview, Pac was calm but dangerous. His words felt like warning shots disguised as commentary. "I'm like a lightning rod," he said. "I'm attacking New York's finest. There." Self-proclaimed king of New York. He wasn't just throwing shots at a rival label, he was naming Diddy without actually saying his name. You have to understand, this wasn't just about music. Tupac was pulling back the curtain. He saw something in Diddy early. The manipulation, the insecurity, the hunger for power. Not earned by respect, but protected by silence. Every time it benefits New York, he represents New York. When it don't, now he's just another rapper, Pac said. But y'all let him wear your colors. It was bold. It was fearless, and it was the beginning of something no one was ready to hear. Years later, in a courtroom packed with sealed testimonies, buried recordings, and names falling like dominoes, we're finally seeing exactly what Tupac tried to show us. Diddy wasn't just playing the game, he was rewriting the rules. Quietly, carefully, like a man building an empire out of secrets. And Pac? He tried to warn us, but the industry made sure that tape disappeared on purpose. It started like any other day in court, lawyers murmuring, reporters adjusting their mics, everyone waiting for the next name to be called. But what came next wasn't just another lawsuit, it was the unraveling of a machine. The prosecution didn't just bring up abuse, they brought up infrastructure, a network of fear, money, NDAs, and forced silence. And Diddy? He wasn't just involved, he was at the center of it. Cassie Ventura took the stand. Her voice cracked, but her words didn't. She told them about the nights, the cameras, the rituals, how networking turned into something darker. Her phone was taken, her choices erased. She described velvet-curtained hotel rooms and a man who didn't just crave power, he demanded control. She said something that shook the courtroom. You weren't invited into Diddy's world. You were absorbed into it, but Cassie wasn't alone. The next witness wasn't an actress, wasn't a singer. He was the man who used to guard the front door, Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard. He looked Diddy in the eye and said, "You weren't protecting anything. You were hiding everything." Deal confirmed what many had long suspected. Diddy had the Angie Martinez tape. He heard it. He buried it. Because in that interview, Tupac wasn't just venting. He was laying out a blueprint, a map straight to the truth. And Puff knew if the world ever heard it, his empire would burn. Then came the wild card, Monique. She wasn't expected, she wasn't scheduled, but when she stepped onto the stand, the temperature in the room dropped. She didn't come with anger. She came with receipts, timelines, quotes, private audio. She told the court, people weren't protecting Diddy because they believed him. They were protecting their own seats at the table, and Diddy was sitting at the head of it. She pointed fingers at big names, Tyler Perry, Oprah, executives, media heads. She didn't just say they were silent. She said they were complicit. At one point, she looked toward the jury and said, this trial was supposed to be about Cassie, but now it's about the entire ecosystem that let this happen. The judge didn't stop her. No one could, because in that moment, it wasn't just about Diddy anymore. It was about a world that let someone like him become untouchable, while silencing the people who dared to speak. And Tupac? He was the first voice they tried to silence. He once took bullets for Diddy. Now he was aiming truth at him. Gene Deal walked into that courtroom like he'd been holding this in for decades, and maybe he had. He stood behind Diddy during the peak of Bad Boy. He saw the parties, the guests, the unspoken rules, but now he was done pretending. He took the oath, looked straight at Diddy, and said, "You remember what you told me back then? You said Tupac talks too much. One day someone's going to shut him up. I didn't forget that." You could hear hearts drop. Gene wasn't theatrical. He was tired, he wasn't angry, he was ready. He described how Diddy ordered the Angie Martinez interview to be buried. He had ears on everything, Gene said. Nothing got past him. And Pac's voice? That was too dangerous. It was dangerous to let that truth out, Gene told the jury. He explained that Diddy's obsession with Tupac wasn't just professional competition, it was deeply personal. It wasn't rivalry, it was envy. Puff studied him, Gene said. The way Tupac dressed, the way he moved, the way he commanded attention without trying. Diddy wanted that, but he couldn't buy it. Gene described how Diddy copied Pac's Versace outfits, chased the same women, mimicked his speeches, even stole his Grammy acceptance lines word for word. He didn't want to be better, Gene said. He wanted to be him. But the moment that turned stomachs came when Gene talked about fear. He said Diddy didn't build his empire on talent. He built it on surveillance, control, and secrets. He kept footage. He paid people off. He knew who to threaten, who to reward, and who to erase. And Tupac? Pac saw through all of it. He was the first one to say, Diddy might be playing with something dark, Gene told the courtroom. The moment Pac said it out loud, everything shifted. Gene's voice cracked. Just once, they didn't just want Pac gone, he said. They wanted what he stood for gone. The courtroom fell silent. Tupac never called himself a hero, but he had a dangerous habit. Telling the truth before anyone was ready to hear it. He didn't just rap about the streets, he studied them. Behind the iconic charisma was a man who read constantly, who researched, who connected dots most people ignored, and one of the first patterns he spotted was Diddy. Pac had always been suspicious, but according to Suge Knight and those closest to him, it was more than suspicion, it was alarm. He began, noticing things that didn't add up. Why was this executive suddenly in every room? Why were so many young artists stuck in contracts they couldn't escape? And when Pac tried to talk about it, they laughed him off. Paranoid, they called him. He wasn't paranoid, he was paying attention. Suge later said Tupac once pulled him aside and said, something ain't right about Puff. I don't know what it is yet, but it's coming. Pass. Didn't throw accusations lightly. He did his homework. And when he started hearing whispers about how certain producers were moving, about secret relationships, NDAs, and too many young dancers being kept around, he started asking the kind of questions that made powerful people nervous. It wasn't about sexuality. Pac didn't care if someone was gay. That wasn't the issue. What he cared about was exploitation, power being used to manipulate people, especially kids who didn't know better. Soog said Pac had been planning to go public, not to out anyone, but to protect people. Some of these dudes might be around somebody's child one day, Suge claimed Pac told him, and if we know something, we got a duty to speak on it. But Pac never got the chance, because just as he started connecting the dots between Diddy, Uptown Records founder Andre Harrell, and the dancers and artists in their orbit, the warning lights got brighter. He began to understand. This wasn't smoke and mirrors, this was concrete and control. And he believed Diddy wasn't the king. He was the gatekeeper for something even bigger. This wasn't about jealousy. This wasn't rap beef. This was a man seeing the machine for what it truly was, a silence engine. And Diddy? He wasn't just a passenger. He was driving the tragedy. People called Pac crazy, said he was spiraling, said he was starting drama. They didn't realize, until decades later, he was one of the only people trying to stop it. You could feel the air change in the courtroom every time someone mentioned Quad Studios. It was like stepping into the moment history pivoted, and only Tupac noticed. November 30th, 1994, Tupac walks into Quad Recording Studios in Manhattan. He's there for a late night session, something simple. It was supposed to be a routine studio session. November 30th, 1994, Tupac walked into Quad Studios like he'd done 100 times before. Head high, lyrics ready, energy sharp. But the moment he stepped into that lobby, chaos. Erupted gunshots, screams, blood. He was ambushed, robbed, shot 5 times, and left for dead on the cold studio floor. He survived. But what cut deepest wasn't the bullets, it was the betrayal. From his hospital bed, Tupac already knew this wasn't random. This wasn't a mugging gone wrong. It was a setup. Someone knew he'd be there. Someone had made sure the hallway lights were out, and someone wanted him silenced, just not dead. Not yet. In Pac's mind, all roads led back to Bad Boy. This wasn't just a theory, it was the look in people's eyes afterward. It was the silence, the way Biggie and Diddy, who were upstairs in the same building, pretended they knew nothing, no calls, no visit, just cold distance and a fast-moving PR machine. Then, not long after, Diddy dropped a track. Who shot ya? The timing? Suspicious. The lyrics? Cold, calculated. Diddy and Biggie claimed it was recorded before the shooting. Pac didn't buy it. He heard the real message in it. Stay quiet, or next time you don't get up. Years later, Diddy would smirk his way through interviews about the shooting. He'd dodge, he'd deflect. He'd say he had no idea what happened that night. But insiders told a different story. Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard, testified that Bad Boy was buzzing immediately after the shooting. Some people laughed, others looked shaken, but no one looked surprised. Pac went to jail not long after, and while he sat behind bars, the industry moved on. Bad Boy rose. Death. Rose staggered, and Diddy's shadow grew. Tupac later said, "That moment taught me the game, the rules, the snakes." He never walked into a building the same way again, because after Quad Studios, he learned something chilling. The real danger doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the people you once called family. That's the day Diddy stopped being a rival and became a suspect. You can't buy charisma, you can't fake spirit, and that's what drove Diddy mad. Tupac had what no executive could manufacture: real power. Not just money, not radio spins, not even awards. He had the people. The streets loved him, women adored him, men feared and respected him. He didn't just walk into a room, he took it over. And Diddy? He hated that. Gene Deal called it what it was: obsession. He watched Pac like a hawk, His moves, his clothes, the women he spoke to. It started as admiration, but it turned dark, real fast. Pac wore Versace? Suddenly, Diddy wore Versace. Pac spoke about loyalty, struggle, black unity. Suddenly, Puff was quoting quotes, playing revolutionary. But everyone saw it. It was performance. A costume, a borrowed soul. There's even a Grammy night story. Diddy took the stage, accepted his award, and quoted Tupac's speech, line for line. Not an accident. Not a tribute. Theft in plain sight. And then there was Kim Porter, Tupac, and Kim had crossed paths. She respected him. Maybe more than that. Rumors say she admired his fire, his truth, and Diddy knew. Some even claim Diddy's relationship with Kim turned hostile after she brought up Tupac too many times. Jealousy? Maybe, but this wasn't about love. This was about control. Pac knew. He even joked about it once, saying, "That man wants to be me so bad, he'd do anything, even hurt me." And now, years later, fans are starting to wonder, was he right? The courtroom testimonies painted Diddy as not just manipulative, but strategic, obsessive, calculating, cold. And suddenly, Tupac's words, the ones they said were crazy, they started to make sense. Diddy wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing immortality, and he'd bury anyone to get it. Now, with the courtroom stacked high with evidence, transcripts, and finally, truth tellers, one thing is clear: Tupac wasn't paranoid. He just saw the monster first. But the thing that haunts everyone isn't what was said, it's what wasn't. The Angie Martinez interview, a ghost in hip-hop. Everyone knows it happened. Everyone knows it was explosive. But almost no one has heard it. Out of 2 hours recorded, only 10 minutes were ever released. Now, with courtroom pressure tightening, we're finally learning why. When Angie first spoke about it, she was still nervous, years later. She said she feared airing it would start a war. But her story never fully added up. Why would a rising journalist fly solo into hostile territory, land the interview of her life, and then bury it? Because it wasn't her choice. According to Gene Deal and other insiders, the man who stopped that tape from airing was Sean Diddy Combs. He wasn't protecting the East Coast, he was protecting himself. Deal testified that Puffy was one of the few people who heard the full tape. He called it damaging, uncontrollable. And with one phone call to Hot 97, it vanished. He didn't own the station, but he owned the fear. "Don't air it," he said, and they didn't. Angie later admitted, "I was literally afraid somebody would die if it aired." But the question still hangs in the air. Why? What did Pac say? According to insiders who heard parts of the tape, Pac didn't hold back. He called Diddy the face of a machine built on silence. He talked about people being paid to disappear, about setups disguised as beef, about how Diddy wasn't a player, he was the board. He's more politician than artist, Pac allegedly said, more cult leader than mogul. And the most chilling quote? He doesn't just want you to follow him, he wants to own your voice. Now it's clear why that interview never saw the light of day, because if it had, the game would have ended early. It's when? Will the final truth come out? When? Will the vaults unlock, the tapes be played, the names finally named? Because now, with sworn testimonies, corroborating accounts, and a courtroom no longer bound by the rules of entertainment journalism or fear, the old myths are crumbling. Tupac Shakur's death was always bigger than a rap feud. It was a turning point, a moment where art, power, race, and capitalism collided in ways we're only just beginning to understand. This isn't about one man anymore. It's about a system. A system that rewarded violence but punished vision. System where control wasn't just about contracts, it was about conditioning. A system that didn't just silence voices but bought their silence. Tupac saw it, and he tried to tell us. They want you to dance, to sing, to entertain, but the minute you start thinking, they see you as dangerous. Now, nearly 3 decades later, we're seeing the consequences of ignoring those warnings. Because the Diddy trial isn't just revealing a man, it's revealing a machine.